Okay, so we are live on YouTube and I've activated the broadcast. The moment it hits 12, I will immediately launch into the introduction. And then I've anyways told you how the session progresses. So let's just wait for 12. Okay, I'm going to start now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's live session on tractor and agri equipment sector, the only silver lining in the Corona cloud. This session is brought to you by the team at India's only dedicated off-highway event, CVF Off-Highway. And just to give you a brief background of the event, we were welcoming agri and farm equipment players at a flagship event, Commercial Vehicle Forum, or as some of you may know it as CVF. However, we received numerous audience requests to focus separately and dedicatedly on the off-highway segment, as the dynamics for that segment is quite different from the on-highway one. This led to the birth of our CVF off-highway event, wherein we discuss industry trends, development, and issues facing the Indian off-highway equipment market, such as tractor, agri equipment, construction, earth moving, and mining. We were lucky to have had a very successful first edition of our CVF off-highway event earlier this year on 23rd of January 2020 at the Leela Gurgaon. This was a few months before the pandemic hit. And given the virus crisis post that, we have been organizing a series of live sessions to keep our community engaged and up to date. And therefore, today we are here for a sixth live session. Before we begin today's session, I wanted to take this time to especially thank our partner for supporting this session, Belmax Group. Belmax Group is someone who has supported us since day one, since our very first commercial vehicle forum 5 years ago. While they are a known sheet metal component supplier in CV space, they are also tier one suppliers to major tractor and off-highway OEMs. They are now increasing their presence in this segment by getting into tractor cabins, which is a trend I hope our panelists can shed some light on during this discussion. I have personally had the pleasure of working closely with the Belmax Group over the past 5 years and can safely say that this is one company that puts their heart and soul into providing the best solutions for the industry. In fact, with all three generations of the Belmax family putting their life into it. To know more about the Belmax Group, I would like to now direct your attentions to your screen, wherein we will be playing a short 60-second video. Thank you for your attention, everyone. In terms of the agenda for today's session, we will be having a panel discussion and we'll run few polls during the session. Then finally, we will close with an audience Q&A at the end. So before we start this session, just wanted to share a small ground rule with you guys. I would request all the attendees to direct any questions that they may have to the Q&A section at the bottom of their screen. I'm asking you to do that because that will help us refer to your questions in a focused manner. You can also upvote these questions. This will help us in addressing the most burning topics. So please note once again, questions to be entered in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, I would now like to welcome our moderator for today's session, Mr. Pushan Sharma, who is an associate director at CRISIL. Pushan is someone who has spent over a decade analyzing India's corporate landscape and is currently looking at automobile, agriculture, and consumer food sectors at CRISIL. Over to you, Pushan.
Thanks, Rohit. Thanks for bringing us together for this wonderful panel discussion. So the topic for today's discussion is tractor and agriculture equipment industry, silver lining in the corona cloud. So for the benefit of all the viewers right now, I'll just lay some context on this. So we've had about, in the first quarter of this year, we've had a 24% contraction in the GDP of our country. While all the subsegments of GDP have shown a contraction, agriculture has stood out with a 3.4% growth. And that's the only subsegment that's actually showing a growth. Some of the factors that are propping up agriculture, monsoon, definitely. We've had a 7% above normal monsoon so far. More than 300 districts in our country have received normal rainfall. So on the rainfall front, we're well taken care of so far. We're having the best monsoon in the last 5 years. In terms of the Kharif harvest, we're looking at a bumper harvest again. 5 to 7% increase in production is what we expect internally at CRISIL. But there are some concern areas as well. With a bumper production, there could be pressure on prices. Second is that over the last couple of months, there's been a rapid increase in the COVID cases in rural India. And the harvest season is just a couple of weeks away. So that remains another concern area. If you look at the allied activities for farmers, that is dairy, livestock, which contributes about 10% to their income, that's expected to show a decline, with milk production again being bumper and the procurement prices, as we see for the unorganized sector, being quite low on year. Again, another aspect which is bringing the sentiments down slightly is that the remittance income, which again accounts for about 10% of a rural household farmer's income, with a lot of people reverse migrating back to their villages, the remittance income is also lower. So we've got a good harvest, good monsoon, but some things which are showing a decline in sentiments. So now to declutter this situation, to demystify this, we have an eminent set of panelists who have seen various cycles throughout the industry. We have with us Mr. Shailendra Jagtap, who's the MD and CEO at John Deere India. He has over 35 years of experience in the tractor and farm equipment as well as automotive industry. Prior to John Deere, he has also worked with Mahindra & Mahindra, Tata Cummins and Hindustan Motors. In terms of his education, he's an alumnus of IIM Calcutta and has done his BE Mechanical from SGSITS Indore. We also have with us Mr. Shenu Agarwal, who's the CEO at Escorts Agri Machinery. He has 26 years of diverse experience. He joined the Escorts Group as a GT and has worked in different key positions across domestic and international sales and marketing, as well as R&D, product development, strategy, and project management. He's a visionary executor leading Escorts Vision 2022. He's a mechanical engineer from NIT Kurukshetra and MBA from Duke University, USA. We also have with us Mr. Keswan, who chairs the National Agriculture Committee at FICCI. He is an engineering and management professional with over 40 years of national and international experience in both functional and management areas. His domain expertise covers agriculture, construction and mining, oil tools, and material handling. He has made several presentations and addressed professional gatherings across the globe. Mr. Keswan is also an external faculty for leading management schools. We also have with us Mr. Sriram Kannan, who is the managing director at Class India Private Limited. He's a finance professional with over 22 years of experience working with several large German multinational organizations. His contribution to the success of Class in India and to industries in Punjab is remarkable. Mr. Kannan is also an active member of various industry bodies like VDMA, CII, FICCI, and Invest Punjab. He has a degree in law and commerce, is an associate member, Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, UK, fellow member, Chartered Secretaries, India, and fellow member of Cost and Management Accountants, India. We also have with us Mr. G.S. Grewal, who's the Senior Vice President, Sales, Marketing and Customer Satisfaction at Kubota Agricultural Machinery, India. He has over 30 years of experience in tractor and farm equipment industry. Prior to Kubota, he has also worked with Taffy and Escorts. In terms of his education, he's an MBA from IIM Calcutta with a BTech in Agriculture Engineering from Punjab Agricultural University and BSc from Punjab University. So, like you can see, we have an eminent panelist, and my job over the next 40-45 minutes would be to dig into their knowledge and wisdom to demystify the foggy road that is ahead of us. So I'll start my question with Mr. Jagtap, and the question I have for you, Mr. Jagtap, is we've seen, if you look at the high frequency data points, we are seeing robust growth in various agriculture input segments. So we are seeing good growth in fertilizer, pesticides, seeds, tractors as well is showing robust growth. If you look at the situation on ground, we are seeing that the rains have advanced this year. They have come 12 days ahead of normal and has covered, the full country was covered in early part of June. Now that led to some advancement in sowing as well. So I want to understand from you that the positivity that we are seeing as of now, how much of that is owing to the advancement of agriculture activities, and how much is the real demand according to you? Over to you, Mr. Jagtap.
Yeah, thanks, Bhushan. Thanks, first of all, opportunity for me to really participate in the eminent panel. And we have a lot of colleagues who are very, very experienced in this field, and I'm going to share my thought, and I welcome them to add their comments too. When I really look at agriculture, I think there are a couple of things we need to first understand from the environment point of view. Last year, monsoon was good. It was a little delayed, but it was normal. Reservoir capacity all over the country was full. I think when we started, when we really look at November, December, January of 2019, we were looking up, and it was really a phenomenal year from the agriculture point of view. And then last year also we saw the record production. I think agriculture production somewhere was more than 290 million metric tons. Even fruit and vegetable production was even crossing the grain production. So we were having a very good situation from the agriculture point of view. And then here comes the COVID situation. February, March, we started seeing the impact of that. But nevertheless, I think harvest in the month of April was fantastic. It was a bumper crop. I think government also did a couple of things despite all this COVID situation, or because of COVID situation. They came up with some structural changes. Direct benefit transfer was going on, but they came up with one nation, one market, which a good scheme. We yet need to see the impact of this in the long run. Minimum support prices were good, basically for crop, wheat and pulses. Procurement was good, I think. And when I say good, agriculture is definitely a state subject. So somewhere you find some good things happening, somewhere you see the contradictions too. But overall, it was a strong foundation and strong fundamentals. On the basis of that, we have seen government also doing their bit to really support the agriculture industry. So I think when any country goes through the crisis, I think border security and food security becomes a paramount and very, very important. And I think as an industry, we feel really proud and fortunate to be in the industry where there is a need of food for the country. And government allowed us to operate during COVID situation. They allowed us to start our dealerships. They allowed us to work in the farms. They allowed farmers to work in the farm. They allowed us to support our farmers. And so probably we see that the revival of the agriculture industry faster than the other industry.
Right.
And I do feel that I think that situation continues. There is a demand of the food. It is going to continue to remain. But definitely when we look at the crops being bumper, there can be some pressure on the procurement side and the storage side. So I don't know how much impact it would have, but I do see there may be some challenges on the storage and the supply chain side, on the output side of the agriculture produce. So that is what I sense.
Sure.
But I am sure the government also will look at it, and we will have an adequate solution in place. May not be to full extent, but to some extent when we really get into the next cycle of harvesting.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Jagtap. Definitely, I think government support, like you're mentioning, that would have played a critical role this year. Same question to Mr. Kannan. Mr. Kannan, what are your thoughts? How much of it is the fundamental real demand growing versus just an advancement of demand from a few months forward to, because of the advancement in sowing? Over to you, Mr. Kannan.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you, Kushan and Rohi, for giving us an opportunity for me to present my views. And I would like to thank even my fellow panelists for having an opportunity to share the dais along with them. For sure, the demand is a reality. There is a good monsoon that has taken place. So even before the COVID situation, the market was going very good for us in the month of January, February, March. But unfortunately, COVID hit. But even during the lockdown phase, the government was very open to run the facility, but we were not able to organize material or people to come to the facility and to start the operation. So we had challenges, but the demand was very robust even during those times. We were initially having a fear that the business might go down because the demand might come down. And also, we expected there could be some supply chain challenges, both in terms of handling the crops and also from the production point of view. But when unlock situation started, the government came out very clearly that for sure health is important, but at the same time business is also equally important. So the government also came out with a lot of options to revive the business. And even before the revival of the business, we could able to go to Punjab government and we could able to share the challenges and the demand that we are getting from the customers, and they were really accommodative and they gave us special permissions. For sure, lot of restrictions were put, and we being a German company, we could able to follow all the guidelines not only laid in India, but a lot of guidelines that are being followed in our other group companies in other locations, best practices we brought into in India. Touch wood, we could able to keep the plant away from this pandemic. But when it was symptomatic, we could able to do everything. But now the spread is mostly happening by asymptomatic. So that is also putting us pressure. But still we are confident that we will keep things under control. And the demand from the market is very positive. Sure. And I am expecting a positive trend to follow in the days to come.
Thank you, Mr. Kannan. I'll move to Mr. Keswan now. And Mr. Keswan, from your rich experience over the years, having seen so many cycles, what do you think is driving demand this year? So far, what has been driving, and how do you see the next 5-7 months? And what are the factors that will aid demand this? And in your view, how much role has reverse migration also played in the demand that we are seeing this year?
Thank you. Thanks a lot to Kushan, and thanks, Rohit. And I heard my colleagues talking, especially Jagdap and Mr. Kannan, and I know they have covered some of the questions already with respect to the demand pattern. I'd like to add one or two things to this. One is, see, we tend to forget that the government MSP procurement has never been more than 6 to 7% of the national productivity of the grains. And this year, I anticipate to be even a couple of percentages more is good enough to create a demand, not only in the three states, which is normally Punjab, Haryana, and part of UP, but also in the rest of the country. I think that's a big change I've been noticing. And I also see this is the ability which is actually driving some of the values into the rural economy, number one. Number two, many of us forget that there has been an increase in the free supply of PDS.
Mhm.
They have made it three times. I don't know how many of you really realize it. And remember one thing, the PDS actually comes from all those grains that has been procured. And it actually enables them to vacate the storage space. See, one of the biggest problems in the earlier procurement system was they were not able to because things were not moving out. So that has been one of the big problem of, and I find that I've been in a couple of meetings with the secretaries of the agriculture commissioner or secretaries, whatever you call it. They find that there has been a substantial increase in the procurement because of PDS system also, which is
Right.
again driving the question is ability to absorb. I won't comment on MSP because MSP has always been a little bit of a controversial subject, so I leave it at that. I think the third thing is you talked about the migrant workers and the spread of COVID in the interiors. I just wanted to talk about yesterday's news in a place like Kerala, which has been always been very, very clear on how to be COVID to be handled. I know whether you have read that they are allowing people, even migrant laborers and others, to come back, and anybody who is asymptomatic, not
Mhm.
necessarily that he does not have COVID, they are allowed to work. I
Right.
think it's a very different way. I think we have started looking at COVID differently. While you are right in saying that there has been an increase in the COVID cases in the rural, but you are tending to forget that it's on a very, very small base,
Mhm.
unlike what is happening into the large cities, number one. Number two, right or wrong, the social distancings in the rural, especially I'm really talking about, I'm not talking avoiding A and B category towns. I'm really going below that. Is
Sure.
much more than what we can think of in the cities. So I don't think that's going to be a great problem on assuming this is the trend of COVID. I don't anticipate a problem in the rural. Again, I'm vetting this with the interaction with the in the individual ministries where they are talking about that they don't anticipate an issue. Migrant labor is a very interesting thing. There are two things which has happened with the migrant labor flowing in. I know a lot of migrant laborers who have gone back because they don't have job. They
Mhm.
are gone back to agriculture. So
Right.
there today, one of the advantages what we feel, especially in UP, Bihar, and some of the areas, is the shortage of agriculture labor during the need may not be very high. I'm not talking about the next season. I really don't know. By that time,
Mhm.
reverse migration may start. But
Right.
that is one thing people have been telling me that today there are people available. And number two, the Narega money which is going into villages
Mhm.
is also actually helping them to work on even the agricultural front. So I don't find a huge change in the next 1 or 2 months, and hoping that COVID will come and become stabilized by October, November, and the trend will change. I don't think it's going to be bad as far as Indian agriculture is concerned, and
Sure.
that's my, I don't want to call it a prediction. That is my valued judgment. What else can I say? Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And your valued judgment carries a lot of weight. So thank you for that. Uh, Taking that question to Mr. Shenu Agarwal, so sir, I would just want to add to that. Mr. Keswan mentioned that government procurement has played a critical role. We've seen that for the Rabi season in specific states in Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, we've seen an increase in procurement. But with GST collections, going down, if we compare YOY figures, we were close to 1 lakh or a little above 1 lakh in the April to August period last year. We've been consistently lower than that figure this year. So what according to you is aiding demand so far and in the period ahead? And also if you could provide your views on how do you see the impact of lower GST collections on the tractor and agriculture equipment industry this year?
Yeah, thank you, Pushan. So, I mean, we have all talked about why there has been a spurt in the demand in the last few months. I mean, there are several factors. First, we were sitting on a low base because the industry contracted last year.
Right.
Then there was definitely a pent-up demand, but I think it has played its part mostly. I think maybe another month or month and a half, we will see some pent-up demand coming up from the lockdown period. Um, and then, of course, there is something that could be linked to advancement of the crop cycle also. But I think the growth in demand is for real, other than
Mhm.
these three factors, right? I mean, we have all talked about monsoon, we have talked about production, prices, etc., etc. I think, I mean, we deal with farmers pretty much every day, and I think there is a very positive sentiment around the country, and not and this is not in one particular area, but I think more or less in the entire country, the sentiment is very positive among the farmers. Right now, I mean, a lot of these things help that we have talked about the early opening of the agri sector. We have talked about government focus. We have talked about other things like Manrega and things like that. But I think adding up to it, everything is giving a very positive sentiment. I think banks and NBFCs have played a very good role, even
Mhm.
during the lockdown, because they caught this momentum in the agri sector very well and very early. And because auto and other things were not doing very well, and therefore they also focused and they innovated quite a lot actually, even for agri, because in agri lending is a little bit of a kind of a cumbersome process, but they really innovated well and provided a lot of funds to the agri sector at the right time. So I think everything kind of integrated well into this spurt. And since this is for real, I think this is going to continue for, I mean, in our estimate, probably at least 12 to 18 months. I think we'll
Mhm.
have this positive cycle, if not more, right? So yeah, I don't think GST collections would have any direct impact on this. I think the production is going to be high this time.
Mhm.
It was high last time, and I am quite sure that it will continue like that for next couple of seasons as well. And because the monsoon has been good and the water level has been very good, right?
Right.
So that should help. Um, I think the government focus on agri is remarkable. I think the bills that have been introduced, although there is some controversy around them, so probably not fair to talk about that too much. But
Sure.
I really feel they are historical. I think this is kind of a 1991 moment
Mhm.
for agriculture sector. And of course, lots needs to be seen how they get implemented, how fast they get implemented. Of course, there are a few concerns around MSP, whether MSP will stay or not, and of course, government will have to clarify all that and make sure those fears are removed. But other than that, I think it is very historical.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Agarwal. I'll bring in Mr. Grewal at this moment and just trying to get your initial remarks and your thoughts on the demand, as well as if you could throw some light on the dealer ecosystem. How are they coping with the demand? Of course, it's a good scenario. The demand is higher, but their working during the pandemic, of course, would have changed. So if you could throw light on the dealer ecosystem and how they are preparing for the festive season.
Right. So, firstly, thank you, Mr. Pushan and Mr. Devan, for this organizing this event and inviting us here. So, I think just let me talk about this demand thing, because that's what has been kind of intriguing many of us. So, some of the I think panelists already touched on that. So, I actually found a new word which I found it very interesting. So, we always have been talking about urbanization. So, I think the new word now is ruralization.
Mm-hmm.
So we have across many years been seeing urbanization happening, where the urban youth was moving to the cities. Now we are seeing many urban youth moving back to the villages, which happened. You've seen how it happened in Mumbai, people moving back. So from many of the cities, people have gone back, and definitely this has, to some extent, helped this industry in a way. So which means there has been a back again focus on the rural side, and again the youth has kind of returned hometowns, and probably they are also contributing to this kind of a things. The second thing what we are seeing is the farmers' disposable income seems to have gone up. So if you look at farmers, because this of course insight I've got from some of my dealers only who have been talking about it. The farmers normally, when they make good money from the harvest, where do they spend it? So they will either spend it on social, mostly they will spend it on social events. There are many social, because rural areas have much higher social events happening. So marriages, social events, many things happening. So a lot of money is sometimes spent on those kind of things. So in this time, all those kinds of social events were comparatively less. So definitely, which means the farmers had slightly better disposable income. And that is also being shown in the data. If you see the data of the industry, there has been a more growth on the higher HP segments. Means if you see 45, around the 41 to 50 or 51 and above. Means, so that's where we are seeing. So which means people are buying a slightly higher level of product.
Right.
And also we have seen that some farmers who were earlier kind of involved in some allied activities. He was having some kind of other small business or small kind of allied businesses. Now those businesses definitely got an impact in this time. And so those people also now totally focused back on agriculture. So that is where means that agriculture got the focus. Because means, of course, means if you look at from probably Jan to now, the growth as such will not be so big. But I think last few months have really opened our eyes, because nobody expected in the month of August we'll have a growth of 75%. Even the best estimates, nobody could estimate that kind of a growth happening. And August, July, August is kind of an off-season time.
Right.
And we had a big jump happening. So definitely something is happening, and which means that the disposable income is improving. The focus of the people is coming back on the rural areas. The money is flowing back there. And so the thing is, you can avoid buying clothes, you can avoid buying cars, bikes, but avoid buying food.
Correct.
So food will be always in demand. So food will be always in thing. So I think that's what has happened. I think the other panelists also talked about. So how the government allowed agriculture to continue. In the COVID time, it allowed that some of the dealerships started opening up. Those kind of approvals were received. And so to that extent, as you mentioned about dealer network, so that support, of course, we received from the government side also. Because I think after the first lockdown, when the second lockdown came, we could get those kind of agriculture being taken as a kind of a priority sector. So we approvals to open up dealerships. So probably like in the month of May, we had many of the dealerships were operating. So then again by June, almost all dealerships were operating. People started kind of working and all those kind of things. So I think definitely dealers were quite worried during that period when the COVID hit. I think end of March, or because that was a kind of festive time. Gudi Padwa was there in Maharashtra. So the lockdown came. So definitely huge worry was there. But fortunately, things started looking up from the month of May. From the month of May, we had the growth happening, and now the trend is definitely in a much we are able to see. So that's how I look at it. So I think dealers are now pretty comfortable. Of course, now there is a reverse pressure on to supply the products, which is kind of the other area which we are looking at. Yeah, so that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I go to the third question, I will ask Rohit if you could launch the poll on the factors. So we've heard from our panelists on the various reasons why they believe we are seeing growth. We've touched upon various factors. So if you could launch the poll and we can get the views of our audience as well on the same. Until then, I will go to my third question, and that's for Mr. Jagtap. So we've spoken about demand so far. We've spoken about the factors that have been aiding demand. And what I want to understand from you, sir, and I'll also pose a similar question to Mr. Kannan, is how are you seeing the supply side issues? We were hearing of a lot of supply chain issues, labor unavailability on the auto component side, some critical part availability also, issues that have been mentioned by certain OEMs. How are you seeing the supply side, and with the festive season upon us now?
Yeah, thanks. Bhushan, again for that question, and it is a very, very important aspect of the total agri value chain. Uh, I was reading a very interesting study which was done by, I don't know whom, but we, we, we see that almost 45% of the migrant laborers who have gone back, they want to stay back in their own villages. And out of them, a third of them, they want to work in their own village and on the agri side. Some of them, they want to go back to the nearby towns. So probably if somebody has gone back from Mumbai to, say, Jharkhand, they may not like to come back to Mumbai, but probably they may travel to some distance and may go to Jamshedpur or Calcutta or nearby big cities. So they definitely want to, a third of them, they want to go back. Now, when we also, when I was looking at that study, it said that many of the migrant laborers who are working in the industry, some of them have gone back, they want to return. Now, what is happening on the agri supply chain and input side? I think we are seeing that fertilizers are picking up. So fertilizer availability is good. Seed availability is good. But when we look at from the manufacturing perspective, I think suppliers are concentrated in 4, 5 or couple of areas, which are the industrial cities. And there was another study which says that if you look at the impact of COVID, back in June or July, 7 districts were having 72% of the COVID cases. And these were the industrial areas. So the impact of the industry on the industry was high because those were areas were having an infection. And then because to contain that, when micro containment zones are being defined, some of our suppliers and manufacturing industry in some of the areas is seeing almost 30 to 40% absenteeism. And that is creating an issue on the supply base and the input side on the manufacturing. And that may have some issue with the supply chain of the machinery and the equipment. But however, when I really look at from the logistic point of view, I don't see any much issue on the logistic side. It is picking up. There may be stray incidences somewhere happening. Government support at the district and the other level, they want to start the economic activity, so government support is there. Industry also is adopting a new ways of handling with all this. Industry is also doing a lot of work in terms of creating a safe working environment. So employees, they feel like coming back to the industry and start working. So those activities I do see are happening. But because of this micro containment areas and other thing, I do see there are few challenges, and still there is we do not have very clear sight when this will be over. So probably this may continue to happen for next 1 or 2 quarters more till we get the solution in sight.
Sure. Thank you. If I can go to Mr. Kannan, Mr. Kannan, if I can quickly get your thoughts on how you are seeing the supply chain issues as well.
It's a good question, Kushan. I would like to break this up into 2-3 parts. First thing is like how Mr. Jagtap has told the labor force is becoming a challenge. We are having our facility in north of India. We are in Punjab. So we have lot of our workers coming from UP, Bihar and things like that. And during this pandemic time, everybody went back. So this is becoming a challenge. I don't want to say no to it. As far as labor force is concerned, the second topic is we are having challenges from supplies from our vendors who is supplying parts to manufacture the machine. So we do have those supply challenges also. Initially, when we started the facility sometime in May, June, we had a huge problem. Our machine consisting of 4,500 to 5,000 parts. We may be having 3,000 parts, but for sure there will be some last leg of parts that are missing, and we have to connect to people to get these parts. Normally, if you have to get parts, then we'll say, okay, let's go to the vendor's place and pick it up or do something. But in this current situation, nobody wants to travel or take any risk. So the only thing what we do is resort to the digital media, like how we are doing now. We are trying to connect with people and then try to get out the parts. And when we sometimes get deeper into the topics, why the supplies are not happening, it may go to tier 2, tier 3 vendors. Maybe my vendor is willing to supply, but he is not getting his parts from his tier 2, tier 3 vendors. So it's really a complex situation, and we are really finding it difficult to supply the parts. As of now, I have been telling to my sales colleagues, it's always good to have problem. Now what we are having, normally we will have a demand problem, but at this point of time, the problem is not from the demand side, the problem is from the supply side. So we are really finding it difficult to get the parts to meet the demand. But the good thing I am seeing at this point of time is not only in the regular areas, even in the pandemic areas, like how Mr. Kesaman was telling, that they are allowing people to work even if they have asymptomatic. So now every state has started focusing on reviving the industries. So even the supplies have started ramping up disproportionately is what I should say. So whatever I see as a challenge 3 to 4 weeks before is now more a challenge today. And the commitment that I'm getting from my vendors, I don't know, another 6 weeks, they are telling we will be back on normal track and we can able to supply the parts. Maybe everybody is for business. I will take these answers with a pinch of salt. If not 100%, I would like to say 60, 70, 80% they will achieve. So positivity is in the market, and they're also seeing not every segment has come out with these kind of demands. Only ag industry is coming out with these kind of demands. And the ag industry is majorly bifurcated into tractors and harvesters. So they understood it and they are gearing up to supply. So for sure, labor side is also picking up, and the parts are also started coming as we expected. So I look at this problem should be only short term, and in the long term or medium term, we will come back with meeting out the demands from the customers is what I'm looking at.
Sure. Thanks for sharing your insights, Mr. Kannan. So we've spoken of some here and now parameters on the demand and supply side. Now, I'll try to shift the focus slightly for some time on structural parameters. And I have a question for Mr. Kesavan now. In terms of average land holding size, Mr. Kesavan, India has about 1.14 hectares of average land holding, with majority of land holding concentrated with small and marginal farmers. If we compare ourselves with the developed world, USA, the average land holding size is about 179 hectares. But China has a similar problem as us, with their land holding size is even lower at about 0.6 hectares. Despite that, the farm equipment industry size in China is much higher as compared to India. What I want to understand from you is what are some of the structural measures that could be taken for us to ramp up growth for the farm equipment industry specifically? So, Mr. Kesavan, over to you.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting question. I know it is not a straight answer question. First of all, let me start from the China industry and India industry. I think that's a wrong comparison. Because many of the Chinese tractors, they add on to their numbers, are a very, very small tractors, which probably, I would say, not even equivalent to a good power tiller. So I think if I remove that, China's industry is not really bigger than an Indian tractor industry, number one. Number two is, I'm not really worried. See, this is a question a lot of people ask me. I'm not really worried about what is the size of a land holding. I'm more worried about, with the land holding, is he able to do a good job of farming? And does he have the right kind of equipments to do the job, irrespective of the land holding? And is our equipments helping him to save in all his inputs? In the inputs, in the sense, whether it is the seeds, whether it is fertilizers, whether it is water, whether it is maintaining the land, etc. So this is the question I think we have to go. We are going to go slightly different. Number two is, see, in India, one of the bigger problems is there are rich farm land. I won't go by the size of the land. I'm going to go by the people who are able to get the equipment, either buy it or get it on hire, or the completely marginal farmers.
Mm-hmm.
In the farmer itself of India, there are three categories: the fellow who owns the land and plows it, the fellow leases the land and plows it, and the third kind of farmer is who actually works in the farm. The issue is actually the fellow works in the farm and the fellow actually takes a leased land and work on it. These sectors, even if you give them a CHC, a custom hiring center, what people forget is they don't have the money to hire that equipment.
Right.
You understand what I mean? So there is a very different mindset, and I know only one or two states actually cracked this issue.
Mm-hmm.
I know that MP cracked this issue by giving money for the poor farmers to hire equipment
Mm-hmm.
so that they can actually cultivate their land. Why they did this was there are two, three reasons. One is, I mean, in India, communal divide sometimes stop somebody giving to somebody. More importantly, the economic divide is the bigger one. If I
Mm-hmm.
give it to him, will he ever give me back, or will I have to wait for the puzzle to be over? So these has been the issues.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is what. So if you really ask me, you want a big structural change, I will say, please ensure that all these poor farmers are given some amount of DBT so that he can at least hire the farm equipment so that he can start cultivating them rather than depending on human labor. Any
Sure.
amount of farm equipment in India is not going to elevate the problem of these set of farmers.
Right.
So this is something I know that in the SMAM of government, there is a provision.
Mm-hmm.
Governments have not implemented it across. So this is a major reform I'm expecting to happen.
Sure.
And of course, the other reforms, that the FPOs and others are looking at consolidating. But if you think that lands of Indian farmer will get consolidated into one, I think it is going to be a very, very big and long shot. It is how to get them work together, not how to put the land together.
Sure.
Let me stop here. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I'll move to Mr. Shenu Agarwal now. And on a different note, and I think we're running short of time, so I'll just ask last two questions, one to Mr. Agarwal and one to Mr. Grewal. So, Mr. Agarwal, just wanted to understand that NBFCs play a very critical role in tractor financing. While liquidity is improving in the system, how are you seeing the NBFC ecosystem in India, and how supportive are they being in driving this growth that we're expecting?
I think NBFCs have played a huge role in agricultural lending, right? I mean, we know the status of the public sector banks and even the regular private banks. I mean, I think NBFC has done a marvelous job. They have the largest share of agriculture financing right now, especially in tractors and farm equipment. I think the reason is that they are very focused as compared to banks. I think they are very innovative, very flexible, and I think this whole COVID thing has actually made them realize that they need to bring changes at far better speed than they have so far, right? And we have spoken to like a lot of banks during the COVID because like lending was a major concern, and we just wanted to know how they are thinking about this whole situation. And we got a very positive, amazing kind of response. I mean, not just in their plans, but also in their actions, because I mean, a lot of people have started new methods of financing or new processes, digital processes also, which they had never thought before. I mean, it really didn't require a COVID for them to be able to do that, but then everything comes with a trigger, right? So I think NBFC is very positive. I mean, most of the NBFCs and banks that we speak to are very positive, and they want to lend more and more. The quality of portfolio has not really worsened because of the COVID, although there were some moratorium issues, etc., etc. So something we will get to know maybe in near future how that works out. But I don't think they have a lot of fear or a lot of problems with the agriculture sector right now.
Sure. Thank you for your response. Rohit, if I can request you to share the results of the previous poll, and maybe post that you could launch the second poll related to the supply chain issues, where we've got the views from our panelists already.
Sure. If you can
Uh,
just read out the results to the audience.
Yes. So, as I can see here, the question was on the factors that are driving growth, and people expect by end of this year, by December 2020, 22% audience is in favor of that. Most people feel that till next calendar year, that is till December 2021, they believe that these positive sentiments shall continue, and I think that's in sync with the views of the panel members as well. So if you can launch the second poll question on supply chain issues, and I'll till then go to Mr. Grewal. And Mr. Grewal, I wanted to understand from you on, we spoke about the financing issues. We've also spoken about, hello, I'm hearing, hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So, Mr. Grewal, we spoke about the financing issues. We also spoke about the supply chain issues. Is there any, Mr. Keswan touched upon the business model situation, the opportunities on that front. In your view, is there an opportunity, keeping the low land holding sizes in India in mind, are there opportunities on an alternative business model? Some of it is being explored through CHCs. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. So I think you talked about the China industry and
Right.
other country. So probably if you see even the China industry, definitely on tractors front, still India is much ahead. So because we are the biggest tractor industry across the world, probably we are not the biggest on probably the other equipments.
That's correct.
How about equipments like paddy transplanters? Because paddy is one of the biggest crops we are growing. How about even probably like harvesters? Probably still we need to grow much longer. Still there is a lot of manual harvesting going across the country.
Correct.
So, and that is quite visible now. We can see this year with the farm labor not available. The demand for harvesters also has gone up, which Mr. Kannan will also agree. So the thing is, probably there are drivers which we are able to see now in the COVID era. When definitely farm labor is not available, there is a demand which is shifting, in addition to, of course, tractors, also going toward the farm equipment side.
Sure.
So sometimes, of course, the government policies do help because government has been supporting on some subsidies. But there are some structural changes which help. And actually, COVID is one structural change which has come.
Mm-hmm.
So it means, of course, it's an unfortunate situation, but there are silver linings to any unfortunate situation. So which is this? So in a way, the farm mechanization demand is moving. So in addition to tractors, we are seeing the mechanization going on. So what I see is in India, we have a huge scope of mechanization other than tractors. So if you start looking at various implements, equipments, or maybe harvesting, for planting. So I think that scope is still big enough, which probably I think we will be seeing also growing in the coming years. So which will definitely will be happening. And definitely when farm labor is not available, this kind of thing will automatically, mechanization will grow. So that's how I look at it.
Sure.
Going forward.
Sure.
Sorry,
Thanks.
Did I miss some of your part of your questions?
No, I think you've elaborated on most of the aspects. So thank you so much for that. And definitely,
just another point I wanted to add. I think there was because a lot of questions are coming on the
QA.
Right. And we are not able to answer because we were kind of more into the discussions.
Right.
So probably we can send the questions to us later, and wherever possible, we can answer them if there are specific questions addressed to us. Because the question which are directly addressed to me, somebody asking about exports movement in the next 5 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, in Kubota, we are basically only focusing on the domestic. We don't export anything from India, so I cannot answer that question. So like that, probably there may be many questions coming up, which you can send.
Correct. So I think we've covered various aspects of the industry, both here and now, as well as some structural aspects. So I think it's time maybe we can take a couple of questions. So panel members, if you have seen any interesting question that you would want to take up, if it's addressed to you, you could do that while I scan for these questions as well. Rohit, let me know in case.
Yeah, Pushan, we can share the poll results as well. Those
Sure.
are in.
Yeah, please.
If you could read those.
So the question was, in your opinion, are tractor and farm equipment OEMs still facing supply chain challenges at the production end? And it's a resounding 81% that believes that yes, the supply chain issues are here. And I think Mr. Kannan also touched upon this very well. Yes, so we can move to the Q&A from the audience. Rohit, should we do that?
Yeah, so there are few themes that I have noticed in terms of the Q&A section that is coming up and again and again. So one is, I will start with the emission norms. So people want to know, the audience wants to know the adaptability of the tractor and agri equipment industry to the upcoming emission norms. So what they want to know is what will be the technical as well as the commercial impact to the end user.
Right.
So that is the first question we can start with.
So Mr. Jagtap, if you would want to shed some light on that.
I think Mr. Kesavan can respond to that.
Sure.
He has been doing a lot of things in that area, and we all are definitely doing it. But
okay, see,
Mr.
let me come back to you on two aspects when it comes to emissions. Okay, in TMA, the Tractor and Mechanizers Association, has been forefronting the implementation of the emission norms even as early as 2005, 2006, if you go back to the history. But we have always been talking about one very, very important thing, that whatever the emission norms which comes into the country should be affordable to the farmers, and we'd also need to meet the way the equipments are used in the country. These are the 2 points we have been constantly raising with the ministry. It is, and the third thing, which I know if I talk is going to be extremely a controversial subject, that the entire automotive only gives to 7% of the emission problems in India. It's a well-known fact. 7% is contributed automobile, and probably less than 1.5% is going to be contributed by tractors. So I'm not going to talk on this in a big way because it's a very controversial area and a lot of rulings have come on this. So what is going to happen in a quick answer is, we are going to have an emission norm change for these tractors which are below the above the 50 horsepower, effective 21 October. And the equipments will be start available. I mean, they are given a 6 months period. So by April 2022, whatever the dealer sells will become the next norm. Okay, which is called the Tier 4 norm for above 50. And regarding the smaller horsepowers, we have asked for a 4-year gap between the introduction of the one norm and the other norm. There has been some discussions going on. As of now, we believe that they will agree in time to come, because it's too early to talk about it. One of the issues, to be honest, what you have been facing here is many of the components which come in from the Tier 1 manufacturers, which goes into the tractors, it increases the cost of a tractor exorbitantly. I mean, sometimes in a tractor which is costing about 4, 5, or 6 lakhs, you cannot afford to pay an additional cost of 2 lakhs because there is an emission. And then an owning and operating cost of 50, 60,000 a month, a year gets added.
Right.
And assuming that these chaps will change all this, I mean, I don't even know the farmers are going to change all the filters, etc. And the unfortunate thing is, people are willing to pay for an added cost if there is going to be a productivity increase or something which actually helps the farmers. So there is a big issue there. That is one part. Second is, right or wrong, many of these equipment items and parts are not tested in the Indian conditions. This has been one of our requests to the government, and we requested them time to test it, because what we try to adapt is what the thing which works abroad, which may be right for an automobile or a construction equipment. But our Indian farming practices, like puddling, like running without hoods, is nowhere in the world. And that is the mindset change of farmers, and he's not going to change it so fast. So we said we need to actually physically try it. So this 50 HP introduction, where the volumes are limited, we believe will give us a lot of insight. And government has accepted, okay, we will take a look at it. After introduction, if you have problem, we will decide what to do later.
Sure.
That's where it stands. I mean, that's the situation today.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm seeing yeah.
So Pushit, the next question is for Mr. Jagtap or Mr. Shinu, whoever would like to take this on. So in your view, what is your view on the future demand of tractor cabins and on the ROPS being mandatory? That is another question that I've come across.
So, Mr. Agrawal, you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, so definitely, I mean, these things would come into the Indian market because a lot of customers are getting more discerning to the needs of the comfort while operating the tractor, right? The only, I think, bottleneck, I mean, if you ask any customer, they will say, yes, we need a cab, right? The only thing is, can we make affordable cabs for India so that they get into the mass? Roll bar, I think, is something that we should seriously look at. I mean, through a regulation or within the association, because this is something directly related to the customer safety and is not very, very expensive, right? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I am in favor of both personally. Ropes definitely, but cabins, of course, will take some more time before they come into the masses.
Sure.
So to add to that, this is Shaland, and what see, I look at this and rightly said by Mr. Shin Agrawal that see, cab is cab attributes to a comfort of the operator. So definitely, it depends upon how much is the affordability, and the cab implementation will go as per the customer's need from the comfort point of view. But in John Deere, we feel that I think safety and well-being of the farmer is paramount and is extremely important. So from our point of view, ROFs or ROPS is very, very important from the safety point of view, and it should be implemented.
Mhm.
In fact, most of our tractor, or I can say almost all our tractor, what we export out of India, they go with ROPS. We internally have a deviation to sell tractor without ROPS in India, because currently it is not being mandated, but we do have an option available for the farmers in India also. If they want to buy with ROPS, we do provide with the ROPS and cabins.
Right.
But in our opinion, it should be made mandatory.
Correct.
So another key theme that we are seeing from the questions is what is essentially going to fuel the tractors of the future. Is it going to be an electrification sort of a play? Will it be some other alternate fuel, or will it be a hybridization? So that is one question that a lot of people have asked. If any one of you would like to take that up.
Want me to take that question? Because
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there are a couple of things. See, we always talk about tractor. I think we need to really talk more about implement. I think this is where I'm going to differentiate. Because see, tractor is still a prime mover. Tractor is not what actually does the job on the ground. That's, as I said, the technology is going to be driven much more on the implement side in India. That is where we have a huge gap. And I think somebody like Reval or others also talked about it. See, we are more of a tractorized country than really genuinely a precision mechanized country. So I see a lot of growth happening in that area, number one. Coming to electrification of tractors, unfortunately, the cost element in the electrification being a drawbar machine is not been effectively come to a proper conclusion anywhere in the world. So I think for tractorization, tractors to become electrified, we are definitely going to have time. So it's not going to be an immediate thing. But I won't be surprised to see small, independently running machinery that can be electrified. It can be a weeder, it can be something else. That's why I said we need to look at this from pure tractor into what enables to do the mechanization properly. And there I do genuinely feel a lot of technological improvements are possible. And why I'm specifically saying this is we are talking to the government saying that that is what they need to really make it available for the farmers rather than just subsidizing it and saying that buy the cheapest one. The option should be with the farmer what to buy so that all the manufacturers sitting here, we all make it for the international market. So we can actually get what is suitable from India and showcase it to the farmer and let them decide what he wants to buy. So we have been repeatedly telling, unless we do that, Indian mechanization is not going to change. Because if you really look at it, frankly, Rohit and Bhushan, almost all the equipments what you use are decades old. Very few new equipments are in the market. And that's basically because I'll bluntly say it's because the government policies of telling that this can only be made by the small scale industry till about 5 years back. So big manufacturers were kept away from doing it. And second is subsidy, which drives through tendering. And then they say that the lowest cost one will be bought. That is not going to get technology in this country. I'm sorry to be very strongly coming on this because I believe it's not right what we are doing.
Sure, sure.
So can I just add on this?
Yeah, sure.
So
Please.
specifically on tractors means, of course, electrification is much farther away. But I think one step which we can take is to at least go from a two-wheel drive to a four-wheel drive. So means if you look at across the world, I think two-wheel drive tractors have been almost phased out. And majority of the countries today use four-wheel drive tractors because with the same horsepower, you can get a much better drawer pull if you have a four-wheel drive. So much better traction. So I think that is where we are seeing, of course, some movement happening in India. So we are seeing that slow movement of four-wheel drive now coming in, but I think that's still happening much slower than expected. So I think the first step we probably take is probably move to the four-wheel drive, and then probably going to the electrification maybe in the future would be a possibility if we have some better technologies coming in electrification side. So I think that is one of the steps which as a industry or as a farming segment can take. So
Sure. So Rohit, do we have time for taking any more audience questions?
So I mean, there are one or two other burning questions. If you gentlemen have another 5 minutes, if you can give us, I know we've stretched it by another. Is that okay with everybody? I don't want to.
yes, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Fine, please.
Okay, so that's great. So another, sir, our session topic, the name is the only silver lining in the Corona cloud, right? So a lot of questions that we faced is from potential job hunters, from potential people who are looking to enter this segment, given that it is one of the few growing segments in the economy. So from a human resource perspective, what do you guys feel? Are you going to, in terms of do you see a lot of jobs, coming from your organization or the sector as such? Because a lot of people have asked this question that, in terms of what is going to be the impact for somebody who's maybe looking for a job or looking to change or something of that sort. If one of you would like to volunteer your.
Yeah, so I would take it. I mean, see, in many areas of our companies or the tractor manufacturers, the jobs are directly related to what kind of volumes we produce, right? So for any additional volumes, we do have to hire people, more people to be able to do that. So yes, so if the overall sentiment remains positive as we all feel, and we think the numbers are going to grow for at least 12, 18 months at the industry level, there would certainly be more jobs created at different levels. So that is one. The other thing is that I think the kind of skill that we are all kind of looking at to create a future, like we have talked about alternative fuels, we have talked about different models coming in, etc., etc. Some digitization happening, so the skill set would also undergo a change, although that is going to be not an immediate kind of a change, but that change is already happening, and I think with time it will get further accelerated. So I think in our sector, both things will happen. The kind of people it will change, and also the quantum will go up.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Agarwal, we're seeing a lot of investment that's happening in the ag tech space in India, agriculture technology. How do you see that panning out in India? Is some of the things that we see in the Western world might not be so relevant in India? What are the few things that you see are likely to pick up over the next few years in India?
Uh, See, a lot is happening, as far as ag tech space is concerned. I mean, there are at least like 2 dozen companies that are doing some wonderful work, and there may be many
Right.
more that I don't know, right? But some wonderful work. I think two or three areas that people are focusing right now is one is this whole concept about smart machines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are companies who are experimenting with things like drones,
Right.
etc. Even then there is this whole thing around like remote sensing. So people are trying to put more and more sensors into machines and see what more they can, how they can make these machines more intelligent by sensing different things, and then feeding it into some server and getting some analysis and getting that useful information back to the farmer. So that is another area. And the third area, I think, is the credit side, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, India would need, I mean, all these things that we talk about, India would need a lot of lending. And I think the lending it up to a ticket size of 4, 5, or 3 lakhs is pretty much there. But lending below that size is still kind of very, very cumbersome in the agri market. And there
Correct.
have to be like mega reforms, because I mean, you sell like a 1 million tractors, right, or a few thousand harvesters, so that is easy, right? But the amount of lending that is required on a lower ticket size, is immense, and there is no
Mm-hmm.
structure right now, real good structure to lend that, right? So I think a lot of ag startups are thinking about how to enable that also. So I think these are the three main spaces. Maybe I'm missing one or two.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you
To
so
just
much.
add one point to your question on jobs,
Mhm.
I also genuinely believe that considering the stress what is happening into the European markets, especially the Italian and German markets of owner-driven companies who are actually having a lot of stress, I won't be surprised that some of these equipment manufacturers may plan to use India as a supply side area. I know this because we've been working closely with the Karnataka government for establishing a industrial park targeting only high-end equipments and implements. And they were even planning to give something like 100% return of the entire fixed cost. And
Mm-hmm.
we are getting reasonably good signals. And some of the Chinese equipment manufacturers who have been put up equipment manufacturing setups in China, today they are having a problem because it's not only even to import into India, we are having an issue on that. And government is also coming out. So I anticipate some amount of agricultural equipment, small equipment manufacturers moving into India if you give them the right perspective and right support. So that can be a very great thing. We can become, see, because we have a home base, sheer huge volume, wherein
Mm-hmm.
you can bring in technology and you can use this to export to the world. I know some of the small manufacturers, I call them small on volume, not on technology, looking at India as a possible offshoot. So this is something I think the government and the industry need to work together.
Sure. Sure. So I think we've taken a lot of time from our panelists. So I think thank you so much, gentlemen, for sparing your time, sharing your valuable insights with all of us. I'm sure I can see in the comment section that people are really appreciating the insights that you all have shared and demystified as much as possible the road ahead. So with that, I'll hand over session to Rohit for the closing remarks.
Okay, great. So thank you all for joining us for today's live session on tractor and agri equipment sector. I hope you enjoyed this session and found it useful for your business. Firstly, I would like to thank our speakers for taking out the time for their busy schedules for this. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for taking out the time. And I'm sorry we stretched it by 10-15 minutes. I apologize. Secondly, I would like to thank our wonderful audience for their inquisitiveness and their attention. You asked us around about 70-80 odd questions, but I have these gentlemen only for an hour, so please excuse me if you haven't gotten to your question. And lastly, I would want to thank especially our partner Belmax Group for supporting this session, and thank you all for joining us once again, and we will see you next for our upcoming session on the two-wheeler sector. on 1st October 2020. So please stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.